companies are struggling to get known and found. How do we do it today? You've got to be willing to disrupt. How do you disrupt? Well, the way you disrupt is by doing...
Welcome back to Endless Customers. I'm your host, Alex Winter, and today we have a very special guest. He's a keynote speaker, an author, a partner here at Impact, Marcus Sheridan. Welcome back to the show.
Here we go. It's been a while, so we got a lot to catch up on. Let's do it.
We have a lot to catch up on. There's a lot happening, and the main focus for today's conversation is about Endless Customers, but not the podcast, the new book, Taya 3.0. And I really want to pick your brain because it's your legacy, it's your story, it's your book. I really want to get like a firsthand look at what the evolution of They Ask You Answer into Endless Customers is. So can we start there, and then we'll talk more about the book when it comes out and all the juicy details?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we've seen more change really since November 2022 than we saw in the previous probably 15, 20 years. And that, of course, marks the proliferation of ChatGPT, AI, and a very quickly evolving buyer, a changing marketplace. And I mean, when they say that AI is the ultimate disruption, it is. I mean, it's astounding what it's doing. And so as soon as it came out, like immediately people started realizing, and I was talking about this early, like, okay, so we're going to have a proliferation of content. And They Ask You Answer was really rooted in creating the best content for your space, answering the questions, worries, fears, issues that your buyers had, and going where nobody had gone before with that. Now, that remains true. But I also recognize that for a lot of people, what They Ask You Answer became was this incredible strategy to get more traffic to your website and to get more leads. Trust, traffic, leads, and sales was always like, the big four in so many ways of They Ask You Answer. To a degree, all those are principles that haven't changed at all. But what has changed is now what's going on is Google is having less relevance in the market. Google search, traditional search. When I say less relevance, I mean many people are seeing that they're getting less visitors to their website. Why? Because they're getting a direct answer on Google. They're getting a direct answer on ChatGPT or on Claude. So that's part of it. And of course, then there's the issue of, oh man, there's all this content out there. How do we still get found? How do we get known? Right. How do we win that trust in this market? So all the signals, Alex, were saying it's time to address these, because people kept saying, what's this mean for They Ask You Answer? What's this mean for They Ask You Answer? What's this mean for They Ask You Answer?
It's true. We've been hearing a lot of that lately.
And so, I have stayed at the forefront. What happens whenever there's a big shift, a transition, a change like this? Typically what you see in history is the leaders of the previous generation are the slowest to embrace what comes next. Yeah, that's true. And this is why, the blockbusters of the world are a part of history books, because they didn't want to replace previous business models. And one thing that I've always been committed to was evolution, because I've been obsessed with the way buyers think and behave and how we as businesses can meet that. And so instead of being like a lot of SEO companies that have said, I don't really think AI is going to affect SEO, and I don't think it's going to ultimately have a big impact on your business. Like, come on, stop being intellectually dishonest. Stop protecting your business, right, and start evolving. And so now, instead of being like Kodak, like in my situation, I see what's ahead. Kodak saw what was ahead and had the digital print. They essentially invented digital print. They just didn't do anything with it because they were making too much money on film. Yeah. So instead of me saying, okay, I'm going to hold on to this, everything that has been They Ask You Answer, let's evolve it, but let's call it something different, which is another story that I guess we could probably tell if you'd like to hear it.
I would love to hear that. I'm sure our audience would love to hear that too. Yes.
Well, What's interesting about They Ask You Answer is it has sold more every year since it's been out, which it came out in 2017. Then a revised version came out essentially 2020. But each year keeps selling more. It's a referral-based book. Mm-hmm. What that means is somebody reads it and says, my goodness, this book's awesome. It seems so obvious to me. Why are we not doing it this way? And then they refer it to a friend.
It's a great read too. Not to interrupt.
Yeah, it's a fast read.
It's an easy read. It's relatable. And I felt that when I read it the first time. It was like the light bulb went off. And I think that happens when a lot of people read it.
The issue though is I learned well after the fact from my friend Rory Vaden, who wrote Take the Stairs. He said there's a perfect test that you can follow for a great title to a book.
Oh, interesting.
And you can use this test for books. You can use it for like webinars. You can use it for almost anything. And it's the I want, I wish test. And essentially what it means is in a perfect world, you can say I want or I wish before the title of the thing. So for example, I wish I could have a 4-hour work week. I want atomic habits. I want to win friends and influence people.
Right.
See, they passed this I want, I wish test. Mm-hmm. Nobody says, I wish They Ask You Answer. I want They Ask You Answer.
Right.
Because with They Ask You Answer, what I did is I called it that because I was simplifying in a very just clear way the how, which was obsess over what the buyer's asking, fearing, searching, etc. Be willing to address it online, answer it online.
Yeah.
And it's great in terms of having a light bulb come on and somebody saying, that's the how. But the problem is people don't buy the how. They buy the payoff of the how.
Right.
Right. And
right.
That's when I knew it had to change. And what we came up with was Endless Customers. You know, it's interesting too. Every time somebody hears the title name, they're like, oh gosh, that's awesome. I'm like, yeah, it is awesome. It's great. So that has been the big shift with the title. And now the book is shifting in terms of before it was very much rooted in the Riverpool story, my story arc. Although that's still there, now it's very much a model that someone can follow, which that's what we want to do, a model, a system whereby if you think about EOS, right? So there's this book called Traction.
Love Traction.
Which has really just changed hundreds of thousands of companies.
It's huge. Yeah, it's international.
It's massive. Mm-hmm. And they have now coaches all over the world, but the system is called EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System.
Yep.
So we essentially said we need to create the EOS for sales and marketing. Because if you look at EOS, if you look at Traction, what it doesn't really do well is it doesn't give you a really clear system and frameworks for your marketing.
Yeah, it's more of like the examples and creating that buy-in and that like demand because you want to. At least when I read it, I was like, I want to do what these guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
inspiring.
It's like, well, everybody has a problem getting things done with their business, and so they gave you a very, very clear system of leadership and of meetings and of how to tackle issues and something that we're not taught in school. Right. And so that was great. So we said, could we do that for sales and marketing? And I feel like we have, for the most part, accomplished that for today's buyer. And that's the key because the buyer of today isn't what the buyer of yesterday was. And so we needed to create something that was evergreen, that was principle driven. Now, when I say evergreen, I think the book has at least 5 years on it, at least 5 years. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but when you're writing a marketing book today, to make it worthy of attention for 5 years, it's extremely difficult. I mean, there's most books written on AI are irrelevant after 6 months. Mm-hmm. A lot of them have not gone to print because of the fact that they were irrelevant by the time they were ready to be published in the market, right? And so we need to change that. Yeah. And so that's what's beauty. That's the beauty behind Endless Customers. Now you've got a proven system not a bunch of theory, that you can follow and immediately apply to your business so as to attract way more leads, more customers, and become that most known and trusted brand, which, that's what everybody needs to be today with what's happening in the market.
Yeah, we know building trust is essential. That's what this is really all about. And the delivery method may change with technology and with the world evolving, but the fundamentals are the same. So how does that play into the process? Or how does that play into how people can apply this to their business?
Well, I'm a huge believer in building our business around principles because principles don't die. So
I love that.
The promise is, okay, if you follow this system, you'll become the most known and trusted brand in your market, wherever that market is. Now, this means it's going to apply to B2B, B2C, local, national, domestic, international,
And why is that so important for people out there that this is the first time hearing this? Why should that be at the forefront of what they need to achieve?
Because when you read business books,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes they're niche specific in the strategies that they're recommending to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, can you imagine some of these, massive corporations having some of these sales pages that you see some of these internet marketers saying, hey, this is the way to, build your business? It's no, man, you can't do that.
Right.
So we want to create something that, whether you're a local landscaper or whether you're a massive SaaS company, it's got legs. And it doesn't just have legs today, because you got to become known, you got to become trusted in your market. The known part is getting harder. And it's getting harder because of the proliferation of AI, because of all the noise that's in the market.
Right. So many people are doing it now.
We have a lot of content, and it's just getting very difficult for people to stand out. So that's the one side. It's just this, how do I rise above the noise?
Mm-hmm.
You can't just throw money at it and expect that to work anymore.
Right, that used to work, but that's not the case
There's
anymore.
no question. It used to work.
Yeah.
If you had enough ad spend, you could
just buy out the market.
Dominate the market that way. Getting very hard to do that. So people are going, broke really fast by just throwing money at the problem. You actually have to have strategy behind it today. So that's the known side. You look at the trusted side. Well, we've got a trust deficit in the market, and you're seeing what was working before. People just aren't falling for that stuff anymore. So people are slower to convert now. They're slower to fill out that form. They're slower to call for quote, stuff that just annoys people. And so we've got to be willing to meet buyers where they are. This book is very rooted in meeting the buyer where they are, where you are. If you read Endless Customers, you're going to be yep, I wish that they would do that for me. And I would appreciate that. I would want that. And of course, it's very much rooted in that golden rule of sales and marketing. Treat them as you yourself would want to be treated. So that's why, because it's that goal of become the most known and trusted brand in your market, well, that's why it's got legs, and it will last at least 5 years. There's going to be principles of this book, if you read it in 20, 30 years, it's going to be extremely relevant. Just like They Ask You Answer, still going to be extremely relevant. It's because I come from a place of principles. Now, we had to, once that was established, we had to give a very clear system to follow. And essentially, without going too far into it, and we'll cover this in more detail in another podcast, is within the book you have what's called the four pillars of a known and trusted brand. And so what are those four pillars? The four pillars are, number one, you got to be willing to say, online especially, what others in your space aren't willing to say. Sounds simple, but as soon as you see it, you're like, gosh, we're not talking about those things. Now that's very much rooted in, if you've read They Ask You Answer, that's very much rooted in They Ask You Answer.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, we've got to be willing to show what others in our space aren't willing to show through video. You've been hearing me talk about the importance of video for over a decade.
As long as I've known you.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
without a doubt.
it's only growing in importance. And so we're really looking and leaning into the evolution of that. Yeah. Number 3, you've got to be willing to sell in a way that others aren't willing to sell. Many companies like to think they have what would be a unique sales process. They do not. They don't stand out. And so we've got this almost like inflated sense of unique sales process. It is an epidemic with sales organizations. Not okay. And then the 4th pillar is you've got to be more human than those in your space are willing to be. Because what we're seeing with AI and with technology is that if you're not careful, you can lose that soul, that human edge of your business. So how do you use tech? How do you use AI and be more human than ever? So you got to be willing to say, you got to be willing to show, you got to be willing to sell, and you got to be more human than anybody in your space is willing to be. Now, if you do all these things, you are essentially disrupting your industry. And that's one word that you're going to see a lot in endless customers. Because to get found, to be known, found, trusted today, you cannot follow the rules you've been given.
Right.
Especially as a marketer. You have got to be willing to clear a different path. You can't do it the way it's always been done, right? And so what this means is we have to say, all right, I'm going to have the courage, because it does require courage, that even though our company's never done the thing before, and you'll read about all the different ways to break rules in your industry in the book, even though nobody's ever done these things before, we're going to be willing to do them because we see the payoff. And the discomfort of being stagnant and no change is way greater than the discomfort of going on this new frontier that we've never been on. In fact, nobody in our industry has ever really done before. The most easy example of this that you will see in the book, because it's a natural question, right?
Yeah.
Would be the proliferation of pricing estimators on websites. I am pretty much positive that within the next 5 years, over 90% of all service-based businesses and many non-service, but over 90% of service-based businesses will be forced to have some type of pricing estimator on their website. Now, if you look back at They Ask You Answer, what we really did is we taught people how to discuss cost and price online. Well, the next evolution of that, and that's why one of the reasons why the book is They Ask You Answer 3.0, is we're going from just talking about it to really showing it and to now displaying it while giving them control over it.
Right. It's an interactive way for...
Very interactive.
Yeah.
And what that leads to is a higher sense of resonance, sunk costs with the prospect. Because the prospect has essentially designed their own project now. They have, because they have been engaged with through, let's say, a tool on your website, and they've gotten a price range, they feel fulfilled, they feel satiated. They say, gosh, it's so nice that somebody was willing to give me what I wanted. They trust you more, and then they reach out to you. There's a whole bunch of these examples in the book. That's just one minor example of what we refer to as self-service in this new seller-free economy that we're seeing. And so these are just like, that was just one of many ways that we now teach in the book as to how you can disrupt your space. But I'm really pushing the envelope on disruption. Just one other point to this. Most companies don't realize they have disruptive IP within intellectual property within what they're already doing as an organization. So in the book, I really show you ways how you can identify your IP. What is that thing that you're already doing that the market doesn't realize?
They just don't know. Yeah.
Or they just take for granted.
Okay.
And you learn how to talk about that and show it in such a way that it drives a literal stake in the ground and creates a new niche, a new standard, a new norm, a new rule in an industry. And everybody says, where did that come from? How'd that happen? It was because you drew attention to this thing that you always have done, but because you drew such great attention to it, it's now become the standard in your space, right? And it's no different than I give an example of in the book when I was a pool guy, all fiberglass pools when I started my business. The way they were built is you would dig a hole, and once you dug the hole, you would set the pool shell on a sand base.
Right.
You'd backfill all the way around it with sand.
Okay.
And then you pour your concrete patio around that. Well, anybody with half a brain knows that sand has a problem. Over time, it's going to settle. Right. This is why 2,000 years ago, a book said, don't build your house on sand. And so when we saw this, we were like this is in the year 2000, early 2000s. I'm like, this is crazy. Why are these pools being built on sand? And so we openly talked about, like, aggressively through text, through video, etc. We created new standards for the way fiberglass pools should be installed. And in this case, we said they should go on essentially what is stone gravel.
Right. Okay.
Because gravel goes down, it's already compacted essentially. And so you don't have the same issues that you have with sand. So this became a standard within the entire industry. So what was before, everybody built their pools on sand. Today, pretty much everybody builds their pool on stone. And that's because we drove our stake in the ground. We changed an entire industry. This is what's possible for anybody that's listening to this right now. But they can't just take for granted the thing they're already doing. Curse of knowledge affects a lot of people.
Right.
They're like, I've always done it this way. Yeah, but this is IP. This is something that is a unique differentiator.
No, I like it. Because for me, disruption sometimes can be it's a big word. It's like when you say, I'm going to disrupt my industry, sometimes it can be a little intimidating, but I love it's figuring out your differentiator, figuring out the one thing that you do that's your unique selling proposition to the marketplace, and then just really leaning into it and letting people know what's up. Yeah.
And doing it unapologetically.
Yeah.
That's why, the truth is, Alex, a lot of people, they know inherently they should do many of these things that they're going to read about in Endless Customers, but they're just going to say, gosh, I just don't know if I can take what comes after that, like the attacks from the competition or the negative comments online or the finger pointing or whatever it is. Meanwhile, the one that is willing to be brave, because I always say the rule breakers become the rule makers and the previous leaders become the rule followers.
Yep, that's a fact.
And that's just the history of business. We've seen it over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so Endless Customers shows you how you can constantly evolve. And the other thing about the book that's important is we spent more time explaining, okay, if you want to implement this system within your organization, how do you do it? What does your team look like? How does your team need to evolve?
Yeah, the actual implementation of it and how you can...
Right. And what's AI's role?
Right.
And it's important, too, to note that I really talk about how to maintain that human edge while using AI. We want you to use AI. In fact, you have to use it if you're going to maintain relevancy, because it allows you to do things you never previously could do. And so you don't want to wait for all your competitors to be using it. And you're like, geez, how are they so much more efficient? How have they cut their cost, and how have they increased their, productivity and their creativity and all these things.
All the things. And even the perception in the marketplace for end users. If I see a company that's not using AI, I think that they're antiquated instantly.
That's exactly right.
And that may not be true, but that's the perception that it gives. So you have to be thinking about that. It's really important.
Yeah. So, what's great about the book is, we really give you the whole roadmap, the journey to go on so that you can follow it, because systems are meant to be followed. So too often business books are theoretical and they sound nice, but as soon as you read them, you're like, how exactly do I do this? So if you get endless customers, you're going to say, okay, I've got a plan. I got a process. I know what to do. I know what the journey looks like. I know what my team should look like. And now I just have to do it.
Just got to work the plan.
Yeah, I just got to work the plan.
Yeah.
Just like EOS with traction, right? And so that's the promise behind the book. And if you do it, you're going to become the most known and trusted brand in your market. That's the promise. And if you become the most known and trusted brand in your market, that's why you're going to have that endless flow of leads and ultimately customers and sales, and scale your business at the rate that you want to scale it, because now you've got leverage and you can make those choices and you're not being forced to do things you don't want to do because you're in a position of pain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. This is, I love hearing it directly from you. It's just so cool. And I'm behind the scenes. I get to work on all the marketing and the promo for the book. So I feel like I have like an interesting perspective on it, but to hear this, it's just opening my eyes even more to how exciting this really is. And business owners should be pumped. And when does this come out? Like when are we going to be able to get our hands on it? Where do we go to give us a little bit of that too.
You can pre-order it now. It's at endlesscustomers.com. And I hope you do pre-order it to support myself, to support our team at Impact, and really to support the movement of better business, of more honest, more transparent business built upon the foundation of trust, which I think is a beautiful thing to be behind. And so you're supporting that when you buy Endless Customers, and please tell your friends about it. Even if you've read They Ask You Answer many times, you're going to pick up this book. And, I would say probably 30 to 40% is what you've seen before, but there's all this new stuff and you're just going to be like, wow, I wasn't doing that like I should have been doing it. And now I've got all these new things that, I'm seeing this differently. I'm looking ahead. And the one thing that I do pretty well, Alex, is I see around turns pretty well when it comes to the market, buyers, and how we're evolving.
You do have a lot of foresight.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see 20 years ahead because I don't think anybody can at this point. But, in terms of really what's happening right now that you should be doing and over the next year or two, I'm pretty tapped into that. And I've been right on a whole lot of things over the last decade. And the companies that have followed it have really crushed. And I want you to crush too, because I went from a place of financial pain and stress to financial prosperity, which gave me back my time as a business owner, which gave me an incredible life with my wife, Nikki, my 4 children, my grandson, right? This is what it's like, this whole journey for me.
That's what it's all about.
Has been.
Yeah.
And so that's what's rewarding to me when people follow They Ask You Answer, and I hear some of these stories of going from, pain to peace. And now I know that's going to be the case with Endless Customers, especially because it's so process oriented, right? Mm-hmm. And now we've got this system that we can follow. It's very, very exciting. I'm expecting big things, and I really appreciate everyone's support along the way.
We appreciate you and for sharing all your knowledge and experiences. So thank you for being on the show and for getting us pumped. I don't know. I hope everyone's as excited as I am about the book coming out. And make sure you go to endlesscustomers.com, pre-order the book. Marcus, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
All right. For everybody out there watching and listening, this is Endless Customers. We'll see you on the next episode.